Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of Facts on the Ground. My name is Misty Winston, and I am joined as always by my co-host Jesse Zerwell. And today we have a super cool guest on. She's actually a friend of mine. She's a badass activist. She's a student. She's participated in a ton of actions for Black liberation, anti-imperialism, Assange, you name it. And she's also the new co-host of Slow News Day, and she was just on her first episode this past Sunday with Reverend Annie Chambers, which was an amazing show. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. So yeah, today we have Glory Jones with us. Thank you, Glory, for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Glory.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to just hang out with and talk with people like you guys who are really like you said, just getting out the facts that are on the ground and the stuff that no one's really talking about.
Right. And yeah, thank you again for coming on. And one of the main reasons we wanted to invite you on is that you're, sorry to call out your age, but you're 20, so you're like considered youth, for
Yes.
lack of a better word.
I'm a Zoomer, yeah.
And I think, though, it's really important to pay attention to the political movements that people your age, in your generation, are engaging in. And I'm curious, how did you get started? How did you get politically active? Was there a spark of some kind, or was it a bunch of things?
Yeah, you know what? For most of my life, I was actually very much apolitical because all throughout, school and high school and literally stopping like after my freshman year in college, I was in sports, so I was very much apolitical from that standpoint, and I just didn't have the time to really get into much stuff. But one thing I was always was I was a massive history nerd. So learning about different cultures and like the history of relations between countries was something that always really fascinated me. So from that standpoint, it kind of catapulted me into being interested in foreign policy essentially because it's something that I believe has a lot. I believe that the history of our foreign policy and our current foreign policy has a lot of synthesis with each other. There's a lot of patterns that are very noticeable about U.S. foreign policy. So that just kind of really got me into an interest in foreign policy. And I wasn't strongly supporting or volunteering for anyone in 2015 or 2016, but I did like Bernie Sanders. I was like one of those kids. I was like one of those 16-year-olds that would be like, please register to vote. Like it's your civic duty and all that nonsense. But the difference was I grew up in Broward County, so I grew up knowing how awful our elections were. So my thing is just save the contact of Broward SOE on their phone. And then I would literally be calling them and I would be sitting on hold with them to make sure that like shit was getting counted and that they were tabulating things correctly. And I would walk other people through how to do the same thing. And that kind of escalated into 2018 where I did some texting and phone banking for to help get it was Amendment 4 on Florida's ballot, and it was to restore voting rights to former convicted felons. And basically, that election, there was the recounts in Florida. So, what I was doing was I was essentially like, again, on hold with Broward SOE for hours trying to make sure that they were tabulating votes, that my vote was counted, that my family's vote was counted, trying to walk people through to make sure that their vote was counted. I had to send out tons and tons of cure affidavits, even though like now I know they don't work. And that's kind of how I got really into election integrity from that standpoint, because 2018 kind of really fueled my dissatisfaction with the progressive movement and their lack of ability to address election integrity. And let me try to think of my timeline. And then after that, I started supporting Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 primary. And, you know, she was a compromise for me in terms of like, by then I had been pretty much like radicalized, and I've kind of arrived at the point where I am now in a sense. But not only was she a compromise, but like supporting her was a vehicle for me to really be able to talk about issues I cared about. Because honestly, prior to supporting her, I didn't really have like people around me that could back me up if I wanted to go out and support Assange, or go out and call out our imperialist foreign policy, or go out and be big on election integrity. So from there, I was able to meet tons of people that really backed me up and helped me. And it's come to the point where it is now where, you know, obviously she dropped out. So I'm not supporting anyone right now except for, I mean, I did vote for Gloria La Riva. So there's that. But there's also, now I'm just doing tons of stuff on the ground. I try to go almost like anytime I have a free window of like maybe 3 to 5 hours, I try to go to an action, whether it's virtual or in person. I probably go to like 2 or 3 actions a week now because I'm still trying to figure out how to balance that with school and work. But I go to a bunch of actions. Like I've been to tons of Black Lives Matter protests, some pro-Palestine events, some election integrity actions, just having some like get-togethers with protesters. Like just last Friday, we had a dance party in front of Mayor Garcetti's house. That was a lot of fun. And what else? Yeah, and obviously there's my stuff with Julian Assange and just being like absolutely fucking relentless. And like I'll talk to anyone too. Just last Saturday, I was talking to people who were trying to defend the Proud Boys to my face, but I was still like, okay, that's bullshit. Here's why. And then after, I'm going to tell you why we need your help to fight the national security state and why you need to support Julian Assange. And it's pretty productive dialogue I get with people in person. So just trying to talk with people at these protests as well. And obviously the stuff I do online as well, and just calling and emailing reps, adding them on Twitter, trying to take on after Misty's activities on Twitter. And yeah, that's really all I can think of right now.
Well, I think that that's one thing that I wanted to kind of touch on too, is because one of my favorite things about you, and there are many favorite things about you, but one of them is that you aren't afraid to talk to people who disagree with you. And I personally think that that's a very necessary part of the equation. So, you know, you're not afraid to go talk to some Proud Boy supporters and tell them why they need to support Assange. And I think that that's a really critical thing. Is that something that you think is more prevalent in the younger crowd? Because, you know, people our age, Jesse and I, you know, I see a lot of people who claim to be progressive, but refuse to speak to anybody who's to the right of, you know, like Bernie Sanders or like maybe even Elizabeth Warren. But they won't, if you are any further to the right, then they want to just completely block you off and, you know, mostly mock you. And I don't know how they think that's effective. But do you see that a lot in your generation, that people are more willing to reach across ideological differences?
You know what? I'm not entirely sure. It kind of depends, honestly, on the group of people you're with. I think depending on what type of issue you're advocating for, that kind of depends how many boundaries you're willing to cross to get what you need done. Like I typically consider myself to have a lot of patience, so that's why I'm able to really talk to people who I have massive disagreements with and get them to agree with me on some things. But there are also a lot of people my age that really don't have any patience, and it's perfectly understandable as well, because I think there's a lot of propaganda out there that essentially the dynamic it is with a lot of the like inability to want to talk to each other is you have a mass of people on the right that are being fed like FBI narratives about protesters, and they eat it all up. And then as a response, you have the people on the left, you know, that would be considered Antifa, that identify as anti-fascist, as a response to the hostility from the right in them believing these narratives. They come with a lot less patience, and there's also just less room to talk, because it's like a defense mechanism comes up immediately. But I think anyone who has an understanding of the mechanisms of propaganda and how the national security state and COINTELPRO and all that operates, I think anyone who has an understanding of that, regardless of how age works, can understand that you need to talk to people to break down whatever misconceptions they have.
Yeah, I agree. I think that most often having a dialogue or setting up some kind of dialectical exchange with those with whom you're most opposed those are some of the most productive conversations. So just going off of that, what kind of response have you received from talking to people like Proud Boys defenders and others of of a similar ilk?
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic because they understand that the deep state is a problem, and they understand that, and most of the ones that I've talked to actually like Julian Assange. They think that he needs to be freed, and I'm like, okay, so why aren't you fighting? But it's because, like progressives being sheepdogged by Bernie Sanders into the Democratic Party, a lot of Trump supporters are being sheepdogged by the establishment into supporting Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They're being sheepdogged by the cult of personality around him. And I've talked to them, and they believe that somehow, like in his second term, he'll have like no holds barred, so he'll be able to free all these people and really take on the deep state. And it's like, guys, he has Mike Pence as his president. He employed Elliot Engel, John Bolton. He has freaking Mike Pompeo as a Secretary of State. Like, nothing says I love the deep state more than having Mike Pompeo fourth in line for president. And it's and it's like, they need to understand that Trump isn't the anti-establishment god that they think he is, the same way that progressives need to understand that Bernie isn't the anti-establishment god that they think he is. So It's a cult of personality going both ways.
And I think that Q has also been a really big issue in that aspect, because you have this, conspiratorial sort of nameless, faceless entity that's pushing all these weird stories about how Trump's going to save the world from, billionaire pedophiles and whatever. But it's really difficult to fight back against that narrative, because these people have convinced themselves that Trump is really like saving the world, and he's, and it's a very, if it weren't so damaging, it would be super interesting to study, because the way that these people allow themselves to get taken in by this stuff is really kind of incredible. And I'm not against like quote unquote conspiracy theories. I think that, it's good to ask questions and stuff, but the stuff that they talk about is just so absurd. I mean, they want me to believe that the guy who's prosecuting Julian Assange is the guy that's going to save him. It's completely ridiculous. He's directly responsible for Julian Assange having been tortured for the last year and a half, and longer, but especially the last year and a half. So it's kind of difficult to combat against that kind of magical thinking. But yeah, so when you got involved in the Assange kind of movement, I guess. Were you surprised by how much silence there is and how much pushback you get? Because I've kind of been active in a multitude of issues over the years, and this is, for me personally, by far been the most difficult one to kind of work through and work on and push back against. So when you kind of entered into the fray, did you notice that this is something that is, kind of on another level?
Yeah, I think the only other issue that comes close in terms of like the absolute like brick wall of gaslighting you have to smash through to be able to keep your advocacy up is election integrity, and not like some Stacey Abrams voter suppression bullshit. I'm talking like hardcore, like machines going into the programming of the flash drives and how the tabulations work, and like ballot harvesting and mail-in ballots and how that gets screwed over with the provisionals and stuff, all that. Julian Assange is probably like that issue where it's you have to have like that. There's that great article by Kate Johnstone debunking all the Assange smears, like just constantly having to have that in your arsenal, and like needing to really know your shit to be able to combat against just the constant stream of smears. Like, if there's anything I'm grateful to being an Assange advocate, it's I've had to do tons of research and really educate myself to be able to to go up against all the misinformation, and I'm really grateful for that in a sense, because it's like hardened me. But yeah, the silence from everyone on the left on this issue is absolutely appalling on every levels, and there's no excuse. Like, I'm sorry, there's genuinely no excuse to not even come out in support of him. Like, we've lowered the bar so much where you don't even have to physically go to Belmarsh and break him out or some shit. That's not what we're asking for. We're just asking you to tell your people, like, listen, I support Julian Assange. Please support him. Here's people you can follow. Like, it's not hard to do. It's not hard to make like a simple statement in support of Assange. But these people, the people who don't want to speak on Assange and get freaking prissy about it when we call them out, it's like, we don't want you to go to London and cover his case. You don't have to do that. You just have to support him. That's all we're asking. Mm-hmm. And it's like the appalling double standards between people being like, we need to fight for democracy. This is an attack on our democracy, what Donald Trump is doing. Oh my God. Democracy. Are you seeing these journalists attacked at protests? What is up with that? Like, yeah. What else do you think? Why do you think it's happening? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to support Julian Assange? It's like...
Yeah, well, it's, if you think about the motto that the Washington Post adopted, I guess, soon after Trump was elected, democracy dies in darkness, and the fact that they haven't stood up one iota, as far as I know, for Julian Assange, it's a horrible irony, because here is this journalist, this publisher, who is literally dying in darkness in Belmarsh prison, and these supposed resistance newspapers, these bastions of liberalism, they can't even write.
Well, they are the exact reason why he's dying in darkness, because they won't cover it. If they were covering it, it wouldn't be darkness. So it's very kind of hypocritical, and kind of, it's just gross. I mean, especially given the fact that he is being punished for the exact same thing that they do daily. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they don't care really tells you a lot about who they are as an institution. They know that they're currently not under any direct threat because they don't pose a direct threat to the establishment. That may not always be the case, and so they're shooting themselves in the foot. You know, and it's to be expected. I mean, they're owned by Jeff Bezos. I don't know what anybody expects from, you know, Washington Post, but it's also really depressing, especially if you are somebody that recognizes the absolute necessity that press freedoms are in a democracy. I mean, if you really want a democratic society, you need a foundation of truth and accountability and on which to build that. And that is what a free press is. So it's really been disappointing. I mean, mainstream media, you know, you kind of expect that. But I mean, we've talked about this on, you know, Action for Assange. I've talked about this on other shows. I think we've talked about it here. You know, the independent media, the progressive so-called independent media, the silence is inexcusable. And it's so frustrating. I mean, you have people like Kyle Kulinski, who it took us, you know, badgering him for days. And then he made like an 8-minute video. Has that been surprising to you as well? I mean, I know we've had a conversation about it, you know, on previous shows. But, you know, what has that been like for you to watch? Because for me, it's like, it's so rage inducing.
It's frustrating because it's like I shouldn't have to hold your hand through this case. It shouldn't take, like, in the case of Tim Black and Anna Kasparian, it shouldn't take me and Kimber sending money out of our pockets to people we don't like. Like, you can frame it as an attack all you want. What we did was we sent you money out of our own pockets, despite all the shit you did, because we need you to talk about this case. And it's frustrating to me it's frustrating for me to watch it because, like, I'm 20 years old. I'm fucking, like, I don't mean to be ageist here, but, like, these are grown-ass human beings with, like, money, and they're not balancing, like, school and a job, essentially. Like, this is their main job. In the case of, like, Anna Kasparian, you're a millionaire, honey. Like, you can get your nice little protective vest and get your ass out on the ground to LA and cover these protests. Like, you can hire some researchers to focus on the Assange case. It's like, you guys aren't in the position that we are, where we have jobs, we have lives, but we're working tirelessly to just do what we can to spread the word. And you can't even spare a single video for it. Like, this is your job.
And not only can they not spare a video, but when they're asked to do so, she says, I'll look into that. Are you kidding me? This has been going on for years.
What is there to look into?
I know, but it's like Lori said, though, it's not like they can't hire some interns or some researchers to keep up on what's going on in the Assange case.
You
it's
can
kind
hire
of
me.
important.
I'm in LA.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an important thing. It is literally a historic court case on press freedom. This is news. This is news. Like, this is not, you know, some crap about who Donald Trump insulted today, or what gaffe Joe Biden made, or what children's book Hillary Clinton wrote. This is news. Like, this is legitimate. This impacts literally everyone in the world. And the fact that they have to be asked repeatedly to cover it, and then when they finally respond, it's all look into it. Sweetie, you need to not consider yourself a journalist. You are not. I don't even know what that is. Like, that's the idea that you have to be begged to cover something this crucial and you consider yourself in the news is, you should be embarrassed. You should be very embarrassed of that. It's unbelievably. It's depressing and also kind of hysterical, you know?
Yeah. And I think it blatantly points to the degradation of journalism over the past decade or even a little more. It's become, like Robert Fisk says, hotel journalism. These people are sort of floating in their Elysian bubbles, and they're not actually going anywhere on the ground to report on what's happening. They're, if Israel is bombing Gaza, it's always like Anderson Cooper on a hill in Jerusalem with bombs flying in the background. It's like it's a parody of journalism at this point, I think. And I think that's why there are so few people who have, I don't even think it's a lack of courage. I think it's more so a lack of knowledge. They're stupid, ignorant. They don't understand or don't care to understand the implications of what's happening to Assange.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a lack of courage or like just ignorance. I think that some of it is self-preservation, which is even more gross.
Yeah,
these people don't want to burn bridges. They don't like, I mean, look at Mehdi Hassan. His entire career up until this point has been an MSNBC audition tape. And he got his job. Good job, buddy. I mean, you did it. But that's Anna Kasparian. She wants to be the next host on The View. I mean, these people, it's not a lack of courage. That may be part of it, but I think most of it is just self-protection. They're not in this to actually cover things that matter. They're not in this to do the job of journalism. They're in this to they're careerists. This is what they do. And it's really gross, especially in independent media. And it's funny that, we talk about TYT and how they never cover anything on the street. They did this huge fundraising thing because they had these great investigative journalists, and then they were going to hire more, and they raised all this money and then fired their investigative journalists, which is amazing. I don't know how they got away with that. And they still have people that, follow them and listen to them. You totally robbed your viewers.
Yeah.
You sold them this line that you were going to, hire more investigative journalists, and then instead you fired the only ones that you have. It's just a very bizarre thing, and I don't understand why so many progressives still, follow along with these people. But I think it's like Steve says, that a lot of the progressive types are really just looking for more of like a confirmation bias show. They just want to be told the things that they already know and that they already believe, and it's, they don't want to be pushed. They don't want to be challenged. They just want to talk about Medicare for all and some horse race stuff, and they want to make fun of Elizabeth Warren, and but they don't want to get too deep. They don't want to talk about issues. They don't want to talk about imperialism. They don't want to talk about capitalism. They don't want to talk about
cater to their white savior complex as well.
Yeah,
there's a massive white savior complex in the progressive movement, and as someone who's friends with people like Fee and Nico, who are Black and, a woman of color, and who are just doing great on the ground work as journalists, and essentially have had their own analysis straight up co-opted and shit on for no other reason other than that they're independent people of color. It's like, oh yeah, there's a white savior complex in the progressive movement, and they don't want to talk about that either.
Yeah, just think about the name of Kyle Kulinski's show, Secular Talk. What does that even mean? So he's saying he's not praying. I guess non-secular talk would be praying, right?
It's a really weird name for a political show. I don't know what Humanist Report is supposed to mean either. What?
Listen, it's better than naming your political show The Young Turks.
Yeah. What the fuck? You guys, that's so bad. I can't believe they get away with that shit too. And progressives are they don't seem to have a problem with it. It's, you guys, it's so ridiculous. But I did kind of want to shift gears to talk about some of the Black Lives Matter actions that you've been involved in, because that's not getting a lot of coverage anymore. When the protests first started, it was something that was on all the time, and it was a lot of misinformation was flying about, and still is when it's covered. But coverage seems to have died down a lot. And I think it's important that we continue to talk about it, and that people recognize that people are still in the streets. This is not going away. It's not, they're going to try to, stamp out some of that energy, pre-election. So I think it's important that we still talk about that. So what have you been seeing when you've been attending these actions? Is there still a huge mass of people? Are the cops still being antagonistic? Can you just tell us what you've seen on the streets?
Oh yeah, cops are always antagonistic.
That's probably a dumb question. Yeah.
I will say, I think the last time we had a huge turnout was, I think, 2 weeks ago. We did a protest in downtown LA to protest the decision in the Breonna Taylor case. That had a massive turnout, and unfortunately, it kind of dies off after big events. After you have whenever there's big events, we'll get high numbers, but typically they've been lower than they were in like June and part of July as well. And it's just, I wish the numbers were higher, but we're still generating good numbers for the most part. Like, we're generating sizable crowds that can still block traffic and make noise, and obviously we're generating enough people to attract the attention of the FBI, which is currently in Los Angeles following a shooting of two sheriffs in Compton, which conveniently they still haven't found the killer for. So I've been saying this to Fee for a bit now, but I think it's just a psyop to get the FBI in Los Angeles. Because I'll explain it more, because it was in Compton, and they conveniently had two rookie sheriffs like stationed together for a reason that hasn't been described yet. And they were shot, they recovered, but after that they essentially used that as an excuse to like ramp up the response against protesters, and they invited the FBI in to assist with their investigation, which we don't know anything about how the investigation is going. It's incredibly untransparent. So that just leads me to think that the whole thing was a psyop to begin with. So the FBI is now in Los Angeles. Members of the press are being targeted. There was a woman named Josie Huang who was literally attacked by sheriffs and arrested. On the ground journalist, there's a man named Vishal Singh. He does great work on the ground, live streaming protests and recording them and documenting them. He was targeted, and he actually fractured his foot after a random car sped through a crowd and injured him that way. Also have tons of other great journalists that unfortunately there's just too much for me to name that have been injured or arrested or detained in some way. And we're still being targeted every time we go to these protests. Like, every time I show up, you always know, because they'll pull out like their spotlight and start it's the most annoying thing too, and I yell at them about it. It's like a big spotlight that they just start flashing at you like this. So it's like, thank you, yes, I'm here, Sheriff. And they recognize some of us as well. I've seen them pointing at me a couple times. They recognize Johnny. They target us, and essentially, I can't hear them, but it's my belief that what they're doing is they're discussing who they're going to arrest and detain, because they have a habit of essentially just detaining protesters where they don't even arrest them or cite them. They just like grab you, shove you in their car, and then they ask you questions, and they take pictures of your record and your face, but with their mobile phones. So it's like some extra bull crap that seems like super like thuggy and gang related.
Are the phones their personal phones, or are they issued by the police department?
So I'm not sure, but when I was having my picture taken, when I was being detained, they used like what looked like a normal iPhone, essentially. So it was definitely a mobile phone. I don't know if it was their personal phone, but it looked a lot like their personal phone, just because it didn't have like a special case or anything. And like they whipped it out from like out of nowhere. And I'm just like, okay, this is super like, this is some like executioners type shit. And Executioners is the name of the gang that operates within the LA sheriffs, which makes business out of like setting quotas of like how much they're going to arrest that day or how much they're going to kill that day. and really disgusting stuff. They've also made a habit of just anytime we even go remotely near a sheriff's station, they just make it a habit to brutalize and intimidate us as much as possible. We had there was a week where we were in front of the sheriff's station in South Central LA where they literally declared our protest unlawful within like 2 minutes. And they immediately started tear gassing and firing rubber bullets at us. And they have these things. I always forget what they're called, but they're like pepper spray pellets where like you shoot them at the ground and it releases like a little plume of pepper spray. And they freaking love those because not only do they aim it at the ground, they aim it at your feet, they aim it at your shins, they aim it at your stomach, they aim it at your chest, and they aim it at your face. I have friends that have like black eyes from getting hit in the face with the pepper bullets. There was one instance where like they literally took a shield and tried to like smash one of my friends' legs in. And yeah, it's like it's just constant like I don't even it's like this is fascism, guys.
Mm-hmm.
And like Alex Villanueva, who's the deputy sheriff, is a Democrat, and not only that, but he ran as a progressive as well. So it's like that's just something where like when people tell me to vote Democrat, I'm like, really? I've been getting fucking shot at and tear gassed by Democrats. I got fucking like illegally searched and detained by a Democratic sheriff's office, and you want me to vote for that? Like,
Yeah.
no. And it's
I think
all
that's
insane.
actually a really important point to make, because you're right. This is like legitimate fascism. We're creeping very close to that. Trump's not a real fascist. He doesn't really, I don't think he has any ideology to himself. But we are, as a state, moving towards legitimate fascism. And
Yes.
so many of the issues that you focus on, that I focus on in my advocacy, that Jesse also focuses on, election, policing, press freedoms, all of these things are tactics that fascists will use in order to push their agenda. They want to control all the press. They want to make sure that you know that if you step out of line, the cops are going to kick your ass, and you don't get to have fair elections. And and Jesse and I try to do this on our show so much. We like to try to make connections, to make people see that your issues don't exist in a vacuum. Everything is influenced by everything else. And so you can't address one issue. And we talk about this all the time, at least I do, when I'm discussing Assange and press freedom. It doesn't matter what issue you're fighting for. If you want Medicare for all, good luck doing that without a free press. If you want a Green Deal, good luck doing that without a free press. If you can't, disseminate accurate information and educate people on your positions in a real way, and if you can't have conversations, legitimate conversations in a public sphere, and if you're being force-fed information that is, state approved, you're never going to get any of those things. It's really important that people kind of recognize that all of these things are very much interwoven, and you can't address one without addressing all of them. And some of them are going to be more important than others. I personally think that free speech and free press is pretty high up there. Election integrity is a big one, but I honestly am at the point personally where I don't even know if it's worth it at this point, because our system just needs to be completely destroyed and then rebuilt. So I don't even know if it's worth fighting for election integrity at this point, other than, unless you mean destroying our electoral system as it currently exists and starting over. That I'm down for. But yeah, I think that that's such a key point to make, that, all of these things are very much connected. And it's why I get frustrated with people who don't recognize how foreign policy is also very much influential on domestic policy. You cannot separate the two. And I think that that's something that a lot of people miss.
Just speaking to that.
You're fine.
And
I
going
was
back,
ranting, as I do.
You're totally fine. Just going back to, Glory, what you were talking about with the tactics that the police use, the violence that they use against protesters, I think it's worth acknowledging that a lot of these police officers and a lot of police departments across the US have a sort of like training, strategic sharing operation with Israel. So a lot of US police departments and officers will go to Israel and they'll get trained by the IDF, who basically are trained to murder Palestinians on site. And so they bring those tactics back, and you see it in Minneapolis where George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin, who's out somehow on $1 million non-cash bail.
Julian Assange can't be out, but that fuckwad can be.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think it's something like 1 in 8 of the police officers on the Minneapolis PD have been trained to some extent in Israel. So just talking about connections in foreign policy, it's there within the policing, and they're bringing back these tactics and these experiments of Israeli genocide against Palestinians and using them against us, more or less. So yeah, just building off of that, what you were saying about things being connected. But Glory, I wanted to ask you about the Black Lives Matter movement in terms of there seems to be a schism as with regard to there being a sort of commercial form of Black Lives Matter, and then people who are actually in the streets and protesting and taking action. Can you talk about that at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. As Black Lives, I always want to make the distinction between Black Lives Matter, the movement, and Black Lives Matter, the organization, because Black Lives Matter as an organization, especially at the national level, has been thoroughly co-opted. And it's something that's been thoroughly co-opted by one of my least favorite apparatuses in existence, which is the Black neoliberal class. And yeah, but yeah, that there's that. And at the same time, I also think that there's a lot of organizers on the ground that, even though, you know, we'll say Black Lives Matter and we'll chant it because obviously it's a fact, they don't necessarily align with the movement. And that's actually something that you can kind of see. You can kind of see that divide a bit in full force when it comes to tactics of protesters themselves. Like the night we went to downtown LA, Wednesday night of the Breonna Taylor decision, when we went to downtown LA, we had massive numbers, and there was actually a clear division in tactics, because some of us wanted to occupy the police station because we had the numbers to do so we could essentially push them back ourselves. And there were others that just wanted to march through downtown and keep confrontations to a minimum. And it's also the same thing at other protests as well. Like it's kind of like a running thing where, you know, you're at a Black Lives Matter protest, like that's organized by Black Lives Matter LA, because it'll end before sundown. And and yeah, there's that. And there's also like, it's like the division in tactics and the division between Black Lives Matter organizers and like actual protesters who want to like tear the whole system down. It comes to the point where there's such a division in tactics that we have in LA what we call peace policing, where it's like if someone if someone's yelling at the cops in the middle of a protest and you want to turn them away from the police, it's like, no, don't peace police me. Thank you very much. Or if it's something where like someone's coming up with a spray can to spray paint like Black Lives Matter, Breonna Taylor on like a bank in the middle of downtown, it's like, make sure you turn your cameras away. Make sure you're not discouraging that person. Don't be a peace police. Like it's come to that point where it's like there's a clear division in people who believe that Black Lives Matter and believe in the message of Black Lives Matter, but they don't share the tactics of the organization. And quite frankly, Black Lives Matter is also very performative in a lot of their tactics. And I have a lot of disagreements with Black Lives Matter. Like I said, it's been co-opted by the Black neoliberal elite. So it's like, in that sense, I really don't even say like Black Lives Matter a lot because it's such a co-opted term. I say Black liberation or total liberation, or like I come out with like, I don't know, like decolonization or more term or less co-opted terms than messages that Black Lives Matter uses. Like, I don't think I've used the term social justice in about like 2 years. So there's that.
I think this is something that the left really needs to contend with, because I don't know how to break it to everybody, but all of your movements are going to get co-opted. That is the nature of the beast. That's how they defeat us. And until you recognize that and start to really decentralize your thinking, and stop worrying about these, blue check organizations to guide you. This happens across the board. Occupy Wall Street was co-opted. Black Lives Matter has been co-opted. So many of these being co-opted, that the left really is going to have to come to terms with that and recognize, it's like we see the same thing with the Sunshine movement. Sunrise. Yeah. I mean, they couldn't be more co-opted. It's so obvious and apparent. And then people who are on the left are still, propping them up as if they're a legitimate, socialist, leftist, environmentalist movement. And they're not. It's not even close. And it's really, it's kind of a difficult thing to deal with, because I don't know how to get people to stop being impressed with performative bullshit. It's like with the squad. How do you get people to stop being impressed with sparkle and ignore the fact that there's no substance? You would think, and maybe I was naive, but after Obama, I thought, okay, now for sure, people are going to start paying attention, and they're going to be more critical, and they're going to be more demanding, and they're going to be, they're going to be on top of things, at least people who are politically engaged, people who we, hang out with or deal with on Twitter or whatever. And that's not been the case at all. I mean, they did the same thing with Bernie Sanders. You can't criticize him. And there are lots of legitimate criticizes against him. But if you tell any of his supporters that, they just block you. It's the same way with the squad. Do you have any thoughts on how we can get people to be more focused on, actual action rather than just pretty rhetoric?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of where you are on that, in the sense that like it's lost on me how people can consistently be stuck in this wheel of just perpetual like cult of personalities. And it's like, honestly, we're honestly still working on like getting people to break down their misconceptions of Obama, because like I know protesters that'll be, rallying with me one day, and then the next day they're saying like, oh gosh, I miss Obama. And it's like, wait, really? So there's still a lot we have to get over. And I think part of it is just we need like enough people willing to speak on that won't sheepdog people into the perpetual wheel of cult of personalities. So that's where like that's where it comes, where we need channels like you guys and like Slow News Day and MCSC and Convo Couch and Whitney Webb and Richard Medhurst and a bunch of people that I love, but I can't remember in this moment because fuck this. That's where we just need people like that who are willing to keep spreading the word and keep like educating people, because I don't like I'm like you, I'm at a loss. I think sometimes people do just straight up need to be like educated out of it, because like I'm still in the process of trying to educate my own family out of their obsession with Obama. And it's especially hard because he like filled out those damn March Madness brackets. So it's like I have to get them to get over that too. And it's like it's starting to work, but it still takes time. So it's like we need people, I guess, willing to talk other people through the real truths about their leaders. And I guess it's something that also has to be in person as well, just because you do something on Twitter and it's like insta block. Like Twitter is so full of just straight up punk asses. It's like, and and it doesn't help, either that Twitter is where I run out of patience. So
yeah, I think Twitter is the main source of my anxiety, come to think of it.
See, that's I deal with my anxiety. I go and yell at people.
yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you, Gloria. I think it has to be a face-to-face conversation, and people, you'd be surprised at who's willing to listen to you and actually change their point of view. So it's always worth trying. But
I can't tell you the number of times I've had somebody tell me that, like Jesse, you told me you've spoken to your parents about Julian Assange and they changed their mind. My friend Sam Carliner, who we have interviewed, I've been on his show. His mom like helps him email journalism schools on behalf of Assange and like knocks all that stuff out. Like she's a little activist, like, herself. And, like I've personally had conversations with people in my life who I never thought I would ever, like my brother, for example, who I never thought I would be able to change his mind. And he's like a full on, he's not like going to go rally for Julian Assange, and he's probably not going to donate to WikiLeaks, but he understands, he's an Assange supporter. He's not like, he doesn't buy into the crap anymore. And it really does just take, I think most people, when presented with, the reality of Julian Assange's situation, can very easily be talked into supporting him, because it's just a big pile of bullshit. Like there is nothing substantial. And I think that is, again, where that Katie Johnstone article comes in handy. She could never get enough praise for putting that article together. It is a beast of an article. There's like, I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating. I feel like there's like 70 some points, 70 some smears or something. I may be exaggerating that a little bit.
Last time I remember it was like 50 something.
Yeah, like, and I know she added more recently.
Yeah, but like it's to the point where there are some smears that have like their own sub article linked to it because that's how pervasive the smear is.
Yeah. Well, this has been, and I've, spoken on this before. If anybody is really interested in, propaganda and, that kind of a thing, looking at the past decade of what they've done to Julian Assange is very interesting. It's extremely instructive. It has been very coordinated. They've been very smart about how they've slow walked it. It's not like they went full force right at him all right away. They have very slowly manufactured consent for the treatment that we see that he's getting now. And they've made it acceptable for him to be tortured. They've dehumanized him to such a degree that people aren't even batting an eye at what he's dealing with. So, that's something that I think a lot of people should really try to inform themselves on, because if we can kind of see them coming and be mindful and aware of those tactics, we can be better equipped to fight back against them. And it doesn't stop with Julian Assange. I think it's easy. Well, he's, WikiLeaks. Of course, they're going to go after WikiLeaks. They'll never come after me. They're absolutely coming for all of us. They said as much in court. I mean, they said as much.
Especially with current news forthcoming about what the UK is doing to another amazing journalist.
Are we allowed to talk about that publicly yet, or
I'm not sure.
Okay, maybe we should not then.
You're talking
about, I didn't disclose any names.
Yeah, we did not disclose any names, but there may be some relatively explosive information coming out soon. I don't want to step on any toes or anything, so I'm not going to mention it, but
I tweeted something earlier about the journalist we talked about, Misty.
Oh, yeah, you probably shouldn't have done that, dude, because I don't even know if anybody knows yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
it wasn't blatant,
no,
but
just keep an eye on Slow News Day and Whitney Webb.
Okay. Yeah, I'll actually delete it now because I don't want to.
Right now, things are people are kind of rallying the troops. They're circling the wagons, trying to figure out how to best go about combating this. But let me just say, for sure, this does not stop with Julian Assange. And everybody should know that. Look at the way we've already talked about it tonight. Look at the way journalists are being treated at protests. Do you think that that's not connected? Of course it is. It is absolutely connected. I mean, we just saw Facebook today announce that they're going to be forbidding any talk of Holocaust denial, which, listen, I don't like Holocaust deniers. I mean, that's, I don't understand that that's not like a controversial thing to me, but they should be able to discuss it on a public forum if they want to. That's what free speech is. And you should be able to have those discussions and those, conversations, and you should be allowed to question everything. And so, and we keep seeing this more and more. I mean, we see it with Twitter. Now you can't retweet an article without being like, getting 75 warnings about how this could be misinformation and it could be related to Russia, or, Lee Camp works for RT. Oh my God. And it's so stupid.
I can't even look at like a redfish video that's just a video and nothing else, just a video, and it already has that label that's like, this is like Russian affiliated media or something. And it's something I see with a lot of like progressives who don't like us calling them out to speak for Julian. It's like, oh, well, you guys are just too narrow focused. Like, it's one person. What's the difference? It's like, you idiot. We know, like, we're not dumb. We know that Julian is not the first person, the first journalist to be persecuted. The Espionage Act has an ugly history throughout the early 20th century, and even before that, when they also had the Sedition Act. It's like, and we know, but what we're also concerned about is the fact that we know that he's not going to be the last. If this trial is allowed to go through and they're allowed to essentially indict the act of publishing alone, like, on the ground journalists are going to be screwed.
We've already seen it compounding. Look what Brazil did to Glenn Greenwald. And Glenn Greenwald will straight up tell you that the charges brought against him in Brazil were a carbon copy of what they tried to do, or what they're trying to do to Julian Assange. So they're branching out already. Look what happened to Max Blumenthal. I mean, they sent, a whole SWAT team to come arrest Max Blumenthal. I mean, I love Max, but I don't really think he's much of a threat. Like, he seems like a pretty level-headed dude who's not like, going to go nuts. And so to send a SWAT team to arrest a journalist over something as ridiculous as what they did it for.
His warrant listed him as armed and dangerous too.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. And it's like, go ahead.
It's like, and this isn't just going to affect journalists as well. This case criminalizes the act of publishing as a whole, because just because it's something that journalists do for a profession doesn't mean that it won't screw you over as well. Like, if you're an activist, this case should terrify you, especially if you're a Black Lives Matter activist, because one of the main things that keeps the movement going is the fact that we're able to film the cops. If you publish a clip of the cops beating the shit out of someone, if they can criminalize that act, then you're screwed. Then all of these people are screwed. I'm screwed because I've said shit to Combo Couch of like cops brutalizing us and cops detaining me and cops detaining someone I was with. So it's like, I'd be screwed with this because they'd go after me for essentially just publishing something that goes against what the government is saying that they don't like, essentially. So it's like everybody is screwed by this. If you publish something that goes against the government narrative, you're going to be screwed.
And that's not hyperbole. People need to understand that's not hyperbole. They have said this in court. The prosecution's argument went from, well, Julian Assange is not a journalist. And so then there was a bunch of testimony about how actually, yes, he is a journalist. So then their argument changed from, okay, well, maybe he's a journalist, but that doesn't matter because we have the power to arrest anybody who publishes information that we deem unacceptable. And if you think that the United States of America should have that kind of power, there's no help for you. There's absolutely no way that the United States should be able to go and arrest a journalist or even just anybody. Like you said, Glory, I have retweeted WikiLeaks stuff. I would be subject to this. Anybody who has retweeted any of this information at any time would be subject to arrest. So, this is, it literally is going to influence, like I said before, it sounds overly dramatic. It influences every human being on planet Earth because the United States can now decide and oh, this person's a terrorist. They have now, listed leaktivists and hacktivists at the same level as like ISIS and Al Qaeda. Insane. They're going to use this to completely clamp down on information dispersal and your ability to know what your government is, ability to hold them accountable. It's like I said, a couple weeks ago on Twitter, if you don't fight for free speech and press freedoms right now, you are giving away the ability to fight back later. There is no going back from this. This is a big one. This is one of those turning points in human history. I have tried to get that across to people without sounding so dramatic, but it is that dramatic. It really is that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I also think there's a component to it too that is trying to say, as you mentioned earlier, we're setting an example. We're doing this not only because we disapprove of the information that WikiLeaks is releasing, but we want to show you, the public, or anybody who is thinking about doing something similar to what WikiLeaks has done or other whistleblowers, like, this is how we will clamp down on you.
This is the warning shot. This is absolutely
we will ruin your life. Yeah, it's absolutely about the material that's being released, but it's also about, as you said, setting an example.
And this will have a chilling effect. It already has. This has already dramatically influenced the way journalism is done in this country and around the world. And that's going to continue to get worse. Like I said earlier, you cannot hope to have a functioning democracy and a civil society without transparency and press freedom. It's just not possible. Mm-hmm. You're going to be force-fed state propaganda, and it's going to be impossible to fight back against that once it gets to a certain point. And we're already almost there. Like, it's already almost to that point. But Julian Assange being extradited, that would seal the deal. It's over. It's almost, not even worth fighting anymore, because that's a uphill battle I don't even understand how to go about tackling. But yeah, I just think that people need to, and I think that's why it's important that we talk about how all of these things are connected, because I think if people start to grasp that concept, they'll start, because I get a lot of pushback from people. Well, I'm focused on police brutality, or, I'm fighting for Medicare for all. And listen, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Those are worthy things to fight. But again, you're not going to be able to do that if you don't have free press. So
yeah. And with regard to Medicare for all, the constant pushback from those who oppose, like Chuck Schumer, how are we going to pay for it all? Well, how about we stop funding the military to the tune of $754 billion per year? And that funding has to do with foreign policy, and that connects back to the lack of funding for Medicare for all. And that's just one example of how these things are connected, and you can't. I support people who focus on domestic issues like Medicare for all and women's rights, absolutely. But I think you have to see how those movements are connected to other things that are happening in the world, especially if you consider yourself an anti-imperialist.
I think that a big thing that we're missing on the left is more of an anti-imperialist. That crowd has dwindled down. I mean, it's been by design, I think. Since Vietnam, that's been a very concentrated effort on the part of the ruling elite to destroy the anti-imperialist left. I think that's a big reason why they got rid of the draft. It's a huge part of the reason why we don't have Medicare for all and, free college and jobs. It's much easier for the military to recruit if you don't have any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it really is like everything is connected. So it's, and it's okay to focus on Medicare for all. That's okay. I'm not asking you to make Assange or press freedoms your singular focus. I get that a lot. People will push back and be like, oh, these Assange people are so crazy. They want these politicians to like take this as their number one issue. And I've never asked anybody to ever do that. I just want you to speak out about it. That's not asking too much. So,
yeah.
But Glory's also been a beast on Twitter with me, going after some of these independent media and politicians. I know we've had very similar experiences with certain people, but can you talk a little bit about some of the pushback that you get on Twitter, that maybe I haven't seen? Because, we kind of do our own thing and overlap and then do our own thing. So we've been involved in several of the same skirmishes, but what generally has been, some of the pushback that you've seen?
Well, I'll start with the Tim Black special, which is, oh, sorry, I'm not focusing on Julian Assange. I'm focusing on this issues. I'm focusing on Black issues. It's like, okay, do you know how seriously the Black liberation movement has been absolutely hindered, pegged, and almost like nearly damn destroyed by COINTELPRO, by the national security state, by the police state? Like, how do you think we'll be able to combat those things without the free press if we allow the expansion of the national security state to continue? Because the case of Julian Assange, it's essentially like an expansion of the fascistic policies we already see in this country. So if we allow that to continue, then it's going to come back to haunt us, because it's going to come back to haunt us, like I said, at these protests. If I film something and put something out there of police brutality and I can be targeted for it, I'm going to get fucked. And like Julian Assange is also a political prisoner, and, PSL organizers, Party for Socialism and Liberation, their organizers in Denver were arrested essentially for nothing but staging a sit-in. And it's also connected with the issues of political prisoners. So something like Black liberation is very contingent upon fighting the national security state as well. So that's why I'm essentially able to talk to really anyone, from like Black Lives Matter people to Proud Boy sympathizers, about this issue, because the national security state is going to hamper us all. There's also there's also the weird Anna Kasparian special, where it's like, well, the only reason why we haven't covered this case in like a year and a half is because nothing has happened in the case, which it's so ludicrous.
Yeah,
I don't even know how to respond to that.
Anybody who's been following the Assange case that hears that it's been boring for the past 18 months, I can't roll my eyes hard enough at that statement.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
beyond ridiculous. It has been anything but boring, fam.
Right. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
There's also, and I got this a couple times when I called out Tim Black, was that I'm in this for clout somehow. Like, bro, I don't even have yeah, you've gotten that a lot too. It's like, bro, I don't even have 2,000 followers yet, and I'm making enemies out of like almost like more than half of independent media. I'm not in this for clout. I'm just doing what I can because I believe in the cause. Like, that one's genuinely funny.
Honestly, the clout chaser one is one of my favorites, because if I were going to chase clout, which I honestly wasn't even sure what that meant when it was first said to me, but if I were going, I know that's my okay boomer moment, but if I were going to chase clout, why would I choose such a polarizing issue to plant my flag in? Like, this is not an easy issue. And, you know, I trash Bernie Sanders daily, and I trash the squad daily, and there's no clout in that. Do you have any idea how many people I'm blocked by? There's no clout in that. It's the most absurd allegation that I think I've had, like, that somebody has said to me. It's just such a weird thing. But I think honestly, it really is just a lot of projection when those people say those things.
Yeah. And it's bizarre too how somebody like Tim Black, who once followed me and then unfollowed me, I guess he didn't like what I was tweeting.
Why?
It's weird though how in their arguments they'll like how quickly they go to Twitter and like your Twitter cred as if that fucking matters to the issues that you're talking about. You know, I think that's like Twitter is so embedded and or seeped into journalism now, even independent journalism. It's like it's something you have to.
Well, let's not lie. There is like a Twitter hierarchy. It's really stupid.
That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
and I don't give a
really
shit about having a check mark, but yeah, I just notice a lot of people will. The
reason why I want a check mark is because it gives you a little bit of protection from getting banned or suspended or whatever. And since I run my mouth a lot, something to worry about. So I'd love a blue check mark.
Only reason I want a check mark is because I know that's the only way to get the squad to notice me.
You would get a lot more attention from people on when you're, trying to advocate for issues if you do have a blue check. That's just the reality of it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, people put so much stock in, how many Twitter followers do you have? And it really doesn't matter. Like, I get Twitter is a very useful tool. I myself use it all the time. But it's not, it doesn't say anything about who you are. It doesn't like give you any credibility. It's a social media platform, and people take it a little bit too seriously. Like, seriously, it's a great tool to, get the word out or to, bother people about issues that you care about, especially because you can do so publicly. When you email somebody or you call your congressperson, nobody else reads that email or hears that phone conversation. But if you at somebody on Twitter, that's public. People can see that. Their followers can see that. The people who oppose them can see that. The people who, like in my case, the people who support Julian Assange will look at that. I've had this happen many times where, they look at it and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that politician doesn't support Julian Assange. And now I have to rethink my support of them. And, listen, I'm not trying to like crash anybody's party or, ruin your campaign. But if you can't support Julian Assange, that's on you, homie, not me. So yeah, I think Twitter is a very useful tool, but I think that, a lot of people take it really seriously, and it's kind of weird,
Yeah,
really
just the way it's become sort of mandatory if you're a journalist or if you're even just heavily involved in following what's happening foreign policy wise, domestically. If you're just following the news, it's sort of inserted itself as this mandatory platform to engage on. And again, I don't think it's all bad, but I've noticed that if you strike up a disagreement with somebody, especially if they have a check mark or a large following, a lot of times they'll default to, you know, the fact that you don't have as many followers as they do, or, you know, like you've only been on Twitter for 2 years or whatever. And I'm just pointing it out because I think it's a really bizarre phenomenon.
I will say though that there are accounts that are obvious bots or trolls who, you know, just started their account this month and they have 1 follower, and it's clear that they just created their account to, you know, go cause. There are those people, and I call those people out all the time. Like if you've been on Twitter since, you know, 2015 and you have 2 followers and you've only tweeted 7 times and you jump into my thread to argue with me about Julian Assange, I'm going to call you out for the bot that you probably are. You know, those kinds are, you know, a little bit more obvious, but you're right. I'm probably guilty of calling people bots or trolls who aren't bots or trolls. But it is kind of like a natural instinct to be distrusting of people, especially if you, I mean, God, this is going to sound so lame.
Especially if they don't have their face as the profile.
Yeah.
Because like,
and it's like an anime picture. Those are always, the anime pictures are almost always bots. Not gonna lie. I'm sorry, anime fans. That's a real thing.
Anime obby Twitter is a plague on us all.
Yeah, it really is. So yeah, it's, you know, it's especially when you have you know, a little bit bigger of a following. That sounds so lame because, you know, I do have a little bit bigger of a following. You deal with more assholes and more trolls and more bots, and so as your following grows, you start to get more defensive because you deal with it more. And I'm definitely guilty of that. I know that. But I think it becomes like very instinctual for you to be on guard all the time, because I've had people mass report me and I've had people try to get me suspended, and you know, so you automatically go on defense because you've had to deal with it so many times. So, you know, that's unfortunate, but you know, it just kind of is what it is. But I do think Twitter can be like a super helpful tool. You know, especially in exposing a lot of these politicians. I wanted it before we let Glory go, because she's been very generous with her time. I just realized we're over an hour and a half. Yeah, but I did want to ask you about kind of the Squad and the Tulsi bills and the absolute refusal of them to, you know, be normal human beings. And, you know, just I've kind of been noticing that more people are starting to pick up on how ridiculous the Squad is. But, you know, what is kind of your take on, you know, first of all, the Tulsi bills, the 3 bills that she has? There's one to drop charges against Assange, one to drop charges against Snowden, and then another one to sort of reform the Espionage Act, which I'd be fine if we just got rid of it. But, you know, I'll take what I can get. So what is your take on those bills? And then why do you think the Squad has been so resistant to supporting anything Tulsi does, really?
Yeah, well, I think they're great bills. I mean, like you said, like my one disagreement with her Espionage Act bill is I just think we should get rid of the Espionage Act altogether. Like, it's had such an ugly history. I'm ready for that thing to be like fed to South Floridian alligators. And basically, one thing I really like about her Assange resolution as well is it also begins with reaffirming that all news gathering activities are protected under the First Amendment, which is like, not only is it dropping the charges against Julian Assange, but it's also going against the very thing his indictment is saying. So I really like that resolution. And I love the Snowden resolution as well. You know, don't think he should come back to America personally, because that's I just don't want to seem like poisoned or something. Yeah. But yeah, I think they're great bills.
Yeah,
and
with Novichok.
Damn you, Putin.
Yeah, I think those are great bills. And the fact that people won't support them just because Tulsi wrote them, it's it's like you're a certified punk ass. Like
Yeah,
by the
I
order
agree.
of Lori Jones, you are certified as a punk ass. Cause it's like
You're
it
branded.
yeah, it's pretty much like and normally that's distinction I only say for Ro Khanna, but but like
What about
Well, sir.
what about Chris Murphy?
Yeah.
yeah, there's a tons of them, but I reserved that one for Ro Khanna specifically for some reason I forgot years
Yeah.
ago. But no, I'm like putting it out there now. It's so immature that people won't support this just because it has Tulsi's name attached to it. Like, are you kidding me? And I'm not even biased in saying that I support that like I supported Tulsi. Like I like me support my support of these bills doesn't come from the fact that I supported Tulsi in the primary. It comes from the fact that they're
Right.
fucking good bills. And if
Mhm.
you need an example, just look at how people who didn't support her support these bills. And
Yeah.
it's like it's just
I
so
didn't support
immature.
her. I
Oh
didn't support her. I support the shit out of these bills.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's really these are grown ass adults, and not only are they grown ass adults, these are um elected grown ass adults. These are people in positions of power who are using like this high school drama bullshit mean girls nonsense to justify refusing to support critical legislation. Like these are huge bills. I mean, these are huge bills. The implications of this legislation is massive. I mean, like you said, it's not just about dropping the charges against Julian. This protects journalism and press freedom in the future. And to allow your personal feelings about somebody invade your critical thinking in that way is so juvenile. Those people should be embarrassed. They should retire in shame. They should put out a public apology to the entire country. They're not doing their jobs. What if, I mean, I don't remember what show I was on, but what if somebody like Mike Lee all of a sudden decided he was going to support Medicare for all? Would you refuse to support that because Mike Lee introduced the legislation?
Hmm.
That's how
Right.
ridiculous you sound.
Yeah.
It's so
well, it's like
juvenile and
and
impudent.
AOC worked with like fucking Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio to push like CIA democracy bullshit in China and Hong Kong.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
like she'll work with
After their
lots of
failed
people.
Venezuela attempt.
Yeah. And it's like it's real convenient of you, AOC, to try and push drama with Tulsi Gabbard and Ilhan Omar right when she introduces these bills. Like it's real convenient of you. First of all, like after sitting in a fucking LA County Board of Supervisors meeting for 8 fucking hours to try and talk to them about election integrity and how bullshit their primary was. After that, I have zero tolerance for progressives that want to come out of nowhere and act like they know everything about election integrity. It's like that's just part of my issue with like the whole trying to discredit those bills because Tulsi thinks ballot harvesting is real. Like, oh, fuck out of here, I'll debunk your ass on ballot harvesting later.
Yeah.
Okay, right now we need your support for the free fucking press. Okay, so it's just so immature and it's like I can't even.
I also find it interesting that so many people were giving her so much shit over Project Veritas, and those people regularly cite MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times. And can somebody explain to me how those are any different than Project Veritas? I mean, the last time I checked, Project Veritas has never lied us into a war. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can source shame all you want. And listen, Project Veritas is a shady source. Like, they're not completely on the up and up. There's no question about that. But to pretend like they've never gotten anything wrong, ignore so much.
Another cutout group like the Integrity Initiative in the UK, or I forget what they have going on up at Harvard, but or like Bellingcat, for example, just these like hack organizations that pretend to be intelligence gathering agencies. I think, but people listen to them, and they're used as sources in mainstream news reports, and people are just getting, whatever their agendas are or their ideologies are, that's what people are essentially being spoon-fed without even knowing it. And
then right after criticizing Tulsi for Project Veritas, Ilhan Omar retweets the Lincoln Project. And it's like,
it's
you
like
don't have any shame, girl?
Lincoln Project.
I mean, seriously, it's like neocon, slumber party over there at the Lincoln Project. And part of me honestly wonders if she was legitimately trolling us. Because that's so out of touch with reality to think that you can criticize Tulsi for Project Veritas and then retweet the Lincoln Project. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can source shame if you want, that's fine. But it would be cool if people could just address the content of the discussion at hand and, leave the source shaming for, smaller minds, because Project Veritas has gotten stuff right before. And so pretending like that's not a possibility.
Crystal Ball used their stuff when they broke the Epstein cover-up story. So it's like a broken clock is right twice a day. And like, even if I don't agree with Project Veritas's video on ballot harvesting is an issue. It's like, I'm from District 23 with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Like, ballot harvesting screws us the fuck over because we have like large old people communities, and these independent third-party people just come around like Century Village and help them. And even times they help them like fill out their ballot. And I'm like, sorry, I don't want extra hands on my ballot unless if it's my own or it's my family's. Like, can we just, I don't know why that's so hard to get people to agree to. It's like, and like, it's not a form of voter suppression because they can still put it in the fucking mailbox. It's like, and it just speaks to my earlier point. Like, don't talk to me about voter suppression when you were gaslighting me back in March for calling out rigging in the Democratic primary. Like, please.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and another thing that bothers me about that too is that, people bitch and complain about how Bernie got cheated in 2 primaries and how our elections are rigged and it's so unfair. But then when somebody brings up an issue in our election system, they want to trash her about it. And you can disagree on how pervasive ballot harvesting is and how significant it is across the country, but to deny that it exists is just insane. That's ridiculous. Of course it exists. We have evidence of it. So you can think that it's not that big of a deal, and I'm willing to have that discussion with you. But if you want fair elections, these are conversations that we need to have. These are issues that need to be discussed. We need to talk about ballot harvesting. We need to talk about, voter registration. We need to talk about how election day should be a holiday. We need to talk about a lot of things, proprietary software. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had. So, just straight up bashing somebody who, approaches that topic is really suspect to me, especially coming from people who claim to be Bernie Sanders supporters. Because if anybody should know about how elections are screwed, it's Bernie Sanders supporters. So it's a really weird
Bernie
thing
Sanders
to me.
himself.
Yeah, well, it's a really weird thing to me that these quote unquote progressives get so angry about her bringing up ballot harvesting. And it really just proves that it has nothing to do with the content of her argument. It's a personal thing. They don't like her.
Yeah.
And that's so childish.
I know.
What was the story a few days ago that a bunch of ballots were found behind a building somewhere?
Yeah,
like
well, I mean, it's like Glory talked about
something that would happen in Broward.
Well, it's like Glory talked about in Broward County and Tim Canova. There's a video of them transferring ballots from one car to another car.
Well, and there's also literally ruled in a court of law that Brenda Snipes, the then supervisor of elections, illegally destroyed over 10,000 ballots in a court of law.
They couldn't do a recount. I mean, it's not like this is a made up thing. Both parties cheat like crazy. They will use any dirty trick that they can think of to rig an election. So, getting mad at somebody who's approaching that topic is really dumb if you really want election integrity. which I don't know, if you don't want election integrity, I don't know what you're doing. So yeah, it's just it's a really weird high school thing. This is a personal vendetta. It's, this, like I said earlier, it's this Mean Girls thing where you can't sit with us. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that Ben Norton said in an interview or a podcast a few months ago, that I think he was talking about Maduro, but his point was there's no such thing as the perfect politician, right? Like Tulsi Gabbard's not perfect. I actually was pretty much gunning for her until she dropped out and decided to support Biden. But at the same time, these bills, like we were just talking about, I think they're a right step. They're a step, like a huge right step in the right direction. And I even retweeted her tweet and expressed my support for it. But yeah, it's just it kind of goes back to like the cult of personality we were talking about, and people focusing more on ad hominem attacks rather than what the actual policy is. Like, how can you read those bills and not agree with them?
Yeah.
But
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, Glory, before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you, speaking for myself, I'm 37, so I'm I'm almost over the hill, right? 3 more years. But as far as youth activism goes, what is it? Do you feel like it's a vibrant, there's a vibrant movement, an energetic movement that people of your age or your generation, if you want to say, are
more engaged? Don't break my heart, Glory, because I have thoughts about it. I have feelings here.
Yeah. Just what have you experienced with regard to that?
Yeah, no, I definitely say like being politically engaged is something that has come a lot more commonplace. Like I just remember years ago I would be like the only person into politics. Now it's like everybody's sharing like the memes, and even if it's like the cringe settle for Biden memes and like the register to vote bull crap, like they're still sharing it. And there's obviously like the pervasiveness of like the Sunrise movement. And even though I do worry about organizations like Sunrise and Black Lives Matter like co-opting a lot of the energy we have, I do think there's a lot of genuine energy there, and there's a lot of just like genuine activism and wanting to do what we can to help like unfuck the world that that previous generations ruined for us. So it's like there's a lot of energy out there, whether it's channeled into like a centralized organization or more decentralized activism is kind of something that I find varies a lot. But I definitely can't deny that like the energy's there.
Yeah, Jesse and I actually talked about this before we called you. And I was saying that, I have a lot of, not faith, but like your generation gives me some hope, but I also feel really incredibly guilty because I feel like generations before yours have left you with no choice. So while it's good to hear that there is a lot of, political engagement and people are more involved and, active in politics in whatever way. I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm sure some of it is for Biden, and I'm sure some of it is, voting and all of that stuff. But just the fact that they're involved at that age, I think is great. But I think that it's also really unfortunate that you've kind of been left with no choice. Like we've put you in a position where you guys are either going to have to fight or be screwed. And that sucks. And I feel a lot of guilt about that. I know I'm only one person, but I feel
guilt about it.
Well, I mean, I think everyone should. I think everyone who has had a part in letting it get to this point should feel bad about that. We have failed. Like, our country is failing. It's undeniable, and everybody has had their small part in that. Whether it's that you were apathetic, or hid behind your confirmation bias, or whatever it is, or it's a difficult thing. I don't think any one generation or any one person or any one president is to blame, but I think that everybody should feel bad about the way that the state of our country is in. So yeah, I just feel bad for your generation having to, clean up the messes that everybody else has made. I'm 38, so I'll be 39 in January, but I don't intend to leave you guys on your own. I mean, I'll fight with you. I think to be successful, I personally think it needs to be more of a youth-led movement, for the very reason that the rest of us have already fucked it up. So maybe we should let you guys have a turn. You know what I mean? So yeah, I just think it's cool to hear that everybody your age is, not everybody, but more people are involved. That's kind of where my feelings were, like, don't let me down here, because I do, like, your generation does give me a lot of hope. I mean, I see you guys like on TikTok, and people are crushing it. Like, yeah, I wasn't engaged at 20. Like, I was not at all involved in politics. I didn't care, didn't give a shit, I didn't pay attention, I didn't vote. I could not have cared less. I mean, I did a lot of mutual aid stuff at that age, but I was not engaged in, like, the political system and the combating of how fucked all of it is. So, I mean, kudos to you for being as involved as you are. You're, like, one of my favorite people, because you are, like, constant motion. If you're not emailing somebody, you're calling somebody, or you're headed to a protest, or you're leaving a protest, or you're doing whatever. So that's always homework. But it's really cool. Like, that's cool to see.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome. I agree. And that, like I said in the beginning, that's one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you, because I mean, not to be like all we are the children, but you're the future, and
we sound so old, Jesse.
I know. But
God, this is like such an OK Boomer show. It's ridiculous. I'm gonna go have some Ovaltine and a nap.
It's funny because I actually went to this amazing panel back in February, pre-COVID. It was like this 4-hour panel just educating people about the prosecution of Julian Assange, and like Barry Pollock and Carrie Shankman and like other people from ACLU and like LA organizers were there, and it was like a really solid panel. And and I was like the only one there under the age of like 30. So and we had a Q&A time, and I went up there and I literally said it. I was like, this is a great panel, guys, but I'm the only one here under the age of 30. So what can we do to help change that?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very as far as the WikiLeaks thing goes, Juan Passarelli actually brings this up in his documentary. The collateral murder and video and all of those leaks, the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, that was 10 years ago. So people who are 18 now were 8 when that stuff happened. And so they don't really know what that was about. And so, being able to engage those people and get them involved and, kind of educate them on what's happening, I think is crucial. Action for Assange is going to start a TikTok, because we're all like, I mean, Andrew's the youngest up, he's in his 20s.
I can't wait to see that, by the way.
And we're like, people keep telling us we need to make a TikTok, and I'm like, I'm going to have to hire my 9-year-old to teach me how to TikTok, because I don't know how to TikTok. Yeah. Like, are you kidding me? I don't get it. But anyways, so before we let you go, is there anything you want to add, or are there any like last words that you have? And then also tell people where they can find you, and don't forget Slow News Day.
Thanks. I feel like I kind of got all my rants in here. One thing I'll say is, obviously, if you're able to, get on the ground. In-person activism is just one of the greatest things you can do. And like, it's just so important that with any issue you're advocating for, you're willing to talk to any person to educate them on that. And the best way to do that is in person. That's what I'll leave it at. You can find me on Twitter. Just search Glory Jones, and Glory Jones Assange is going to be like one of the first things to come up. And I'm also a part-time co-host on Slow News Day now. I'll be co-hosting I'll be co-hosting with Steve for 2 out of the 4 Slow News Days each month. And we had a really, really, really awesome episode with Reverend Danny just yesterday. It was literally so awesome. She gave me her blessings and everything, and it was I was like over the moon after that episode. So yeah, if you want to give that a watch, she's like one of the greatest storytellers ever, and she dropped such good knowledge in that episode. And you have the added benefit of Ian Schlackman in the background, just going in the background.
Such a good hype man. Such a good hype man for her. So awesome.
Glory, before we leave you, I just wanted to ask you one last question, because it's something I deal with, and I think Misty probably does as well, and maybe you do too, but I'm interested in how you might deal with it. And that's, we're all involved in politics, geopolitics, these mostly shitty things that are happening in the world. How do you ever get burnt out? Are you able to avoid that? Or like, what's your, I'm just curious look, I'm not trying to say like you're 20, oh, you're a kid, like what's a kid's perspective on this? I don't, the age doesn't matter, but I'm just curious what or how you may avoid that, or if you deal with it, or I don't know, maybe you're like a super trooper.
Nah, I'm not. I think everybody deals with like some degree of burnout. Like me personally, if even just like researching too long, like I'm the kind of person where I use like CIA files for my class assignments because I'm an IR major. So I like look up those files and I go through like the FOIA requests and all that just so I can like debunk it as a paper. And then so I go through all that stuff, and even just like researching that type of stuff alone, it makes me, it just like angers me to no end. So there is a degree of burnout that I deal with. And I think like everybody needs to just, like you need your times to take a break, and you need your time, like you need your outlets as well. Like like a big outlet for me, and it always has been, was sports. It like one scan through my Twitter and it becomes pretty fucking apparent that I love sports. So that's like, and even though people are like, oh, they're part of the bourgeoisie class, like, yeah, I know, but it's like my outlet for me. I need it. It's like,
I'm the same way, Glory. I'm the same way about college football, girl. Don't you ever let anybody make you feel bad about that. I love sports. I'm a former athlete myself, so yeah, it's okay.
Oh,
you know what? A lot of leftist leaders have been athletes.
She's a huge Notre Dame fan.
I will fight you, Jesse Zerwell. I will fucking fight you. At least you didn't say Michigan, though. I would have probably not co-hosted with you ever again. Like, that's blasphemy.
Wait, Misty, which sport?
Yeah. No. Buckeyes.
Ohio State. I love college football. It's like my big thing.
No, like,
I also love
to play.
Oh, lots. Let's see. I ran track. I played softball was my big one. I played that my entire life.
Wait,
I ran track. I played
events.
Huh?
Which events in track?
I did long jump, hurdles, relays, and occasionally sprints, but honestly, I'm not that fast. I was good in relays, but I'm really not all that fast.
That's fucking awesome, because I did triple jump, hurdles, and relays. I was always a stand-in for relays because, like, no cap, I have great exchanges. So
yeah, I'm not like very fast, but I do have great exchanges. Yeah, that's the exact same thing. Yeah, like I played volleyball until like high school, because then that kind of conflicts with softball, so I had to choose one. I was a cheerleader. Like if there was a sport out there, I at least tried it. Yeah, so I mean, I'm really into sports too, and a lot of leftists will give people shit and say you can't be a leftist if you love sports. Do you have any idea how many leftist leaders were athletes? I mean, you know,
like
Che loved sports, and
Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Like, I'm sorry, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, who went, like, who renounced, like, who gave up a year in his career because he didn't want to serve in the Vietnam War. Like, those are athletes, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And Reuben Carter from New Jersey, the Hurricane.
Oh yeah.
You may remember him from
Che
movie and the
played
Bob
rugby.
Dylan song.
Chavez played baseball. Bernie, if you want to consider Bernie a leftist, he played basketball.
Fidel Castro killed it on the court. I seen pictures of him in a little Euro step. Like,
well, Castro was big into baseball, and Nelson Mandela played boxing, and he loved soccer, and of course he obviously used sports as a way to bring Africa together. So I mean, sports have been a huge part. I think sports are just a huge part of humanity. We're competitive by nature. It's okay to like sports, guys. It really is.
Yeah.
So
I think my biggest problem with organized sports, or maybe even my only problem, it's commercialized, but there's always some sort of insertion of the military. There's always like a military advertisement that's inserted into a sports event, whether it's at the beginning or during halftime.
Recent development. That's a post 9/11 development. Prior to 9/11, that wasn't as pervasive. So we can go back. We can go back to a time where it wasn't an imperialist wet dream to, watch a sporting event.
It's ridiculous now. And then you add on top of that most of the stadiums where sports are played, it's not like Giant Stadium anymore. It's MetLife Stadium here in New Jersey, or the Staples Center. It's
Arena, Bank of America Center, American Airlines Arena, as beautiful as it is, overlooking Biscayne Bay and where my lovely Miami Heat play.
Ohio Stadium is still Ohio Stadium, or you can call it the Shoe, but it's still just Ohio Stadium.
That's sort of, not sort of, it's a really weird development, definitely since definitely post 9/11, this just sort of corporate takeover of
corporate and imperialistic takeover. It really is. It's a problem. It's a real problem. So I don't like the Packers, but I have mad respect for them because their fans own their team. So that's dope. It should be like that. It's like a co-op. It's amazing. So is there anything else you wanted to ask, Jesse, or are you good now?
Gloria, is there anything coming up that you want to just let us know about, or
Slow News Day is every Sunday, right? Is that
Slow News Day is every Sunday?
Slow News Day is every Sunday, but obviously Steve also co-hosts the Assange Vigils, which are every Tuesday and Saturday. So there's those, and because I appear on their streams like almost once a week at this point, Convo Couch is streaming they're always streaming. Just turn on post notifications for Convo Couch, and they stream like every other day, and they're also on the ground a lot during weekends as well. So Convo Couch and MCSC Network.
And just shout out to Convo Couch if anybody's interested. They have like a full election day coverage planned. So keep an eye out for that, just to give them a little a little shout out for that, because they've been doing great work. I'm, like I said earlier, not sure how I feel about election reform or whatever, but they are doing amazing work in at least covering the issue. So people should definitely check that out for sure. Lori, it was awesome to have you on. You're welcome back anytime. I'm so glad Steve got you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So generous. Like, we're like over 2 hours now, so thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this has been Facts on the Ground. I'm Misty Winston, and as always, there's my co-host Jesse Zerwell, and our guest today has been Glory Jones, who is a badass activist and fierce fighter for a plethora of issues, and of course the new co-host of Slow News Day. So everybody should check that out. Thanks for being here, guys.
Woo!